You get addicted because the pain of not being yourself is too much. As a child, I had no choice.
Have you ever said yes when you really wanted to say no? Or felt trapped by the need to please others, even at your own expense? Renowned expert Dr. GaborMate reveals the surprising psychology behind people-pleasing and how to set authentic boundaries without losing your kindness. If you've ever felt torn between being true to yourself and keeping the peace, this is the video you can't afford to miss. Trauma doesn't just leave scars on the mind, it infiltrates the way we love, trust, and communicate. It's the hidden enemy that can twist our most intimate connections into battlegrounds of miscommunication and distrust. But why does it happen? And how can you break free from its grip? Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal could completely change the way you see yourself and your relationships. Coming up, we'll explore the invisible triggers that ignite arguments, the deep-rooted flashbacks that turn the past into the present, and most importantly, the patterns we unknowingly create. And repeat. Grab a cup of tea, get cozy together. Let's hear it from Dr. GaborMate.
When the child is born, the child has two needs. The first need is for attachment. And attachment is contact, connection, love. Without that, the human child does not survive. Any mammalian child or even an avian child doesn't survive. So that as soon as you get past the level of reptiles, the reptile is hatched, the mother's long gone by then, and the reptile infant either lives or dies, but there's no attachment to a parenting figure. As soon as you get to the level of birds now, the baby bird has to have an attachment with the parents. The parents have to be attached to the baby. Otherwise, the infant simply does not survive. Mammalians even more so, and most so the human, because we're the least developed, the least mature, with the least developed brains, and the most dependent for the longest period of time of any creature in the universe. So our attachment needs are enormous, and they remain important throughout lifetime because we have to have attachments to form societies, social groups, without which we don't survive. So attachment is a huge need. Be able to connect, belong, be loved by, and love. That's just a basic human need. But we have another need as well, which is for authenticity. Authenticity is the capacity, as I said earlier, to know what we feel, to be in touch with our bodies, and to be able to express who we are and manifest who we are in our activities and in our relationships. Now, why is that? Well, think of a human being in the evolutionary period who's not in touch with their body and their gut feelings. How long do they survive out there in the wild? So authenticity is another huge survival need. Great. So far, so good. But what happens to a child where the attachment need is not compatible with the need for authenticity? In other words, if I'm authentic, my parents will reject me. If I feel what I feel and express what I feel and insist on my own truth, my parents can't handle it. And parents convey those messages unconsciously all the time. Not because they mean to, not because they don't love the child, not because they're not trying to do their best, but because they themselves are suppressed, or traumatized, or hurt, or stressed. So I convey that message many times to my children, believe me, without any conscious desire to do so. In fact, it was the very opposite of what I wished to convey. But that they're not acceptable the way they are, with their emotions the way they are, that's the message my kids got when they were small. And most children get that in our society. Now, what does the child do with that? Well, if I give up my attachment for the sake of authenticity, I lose my relationships on which my life depends. Therefore, there's no question. What becomes suppressed is our authenticity, our emotions. And then we become 25 and 30 or 35, 40, and we don't know who we are. And somebody asks us, what do you feel? You say, I have no idea. And how many times we've all had the experience of having an inkling of a strong gut feeling, but we ignoring it? we're ignoring it and we get into trouble. Well, that tells us what happened. What happened was that at some point we found out it was too costly for our attachment relationships to be in touch with our gut feelings. So then it becomes not our first nature, but our second nature, to suppress our feelings, to lose touch with ourselves, and to suppress our gut feelings. And then we pay the cost later on in the form of addictions, mental illness, or any range of physical illnesses. But it all began with this tragic conflict that children should never be confronted with, but are all the time, between authenticity on the one hand and attachment on the other. And even as adults, so many people are suffering because they want to be themselves, but they're afraid to be because they know, or at least they fear, that if they're themselves, they're going to lose important attachment relationships in their lives.
You know, it's wild when you think about how deeply we're wired for survival. Like at a gut level. Literally. Those instincts to stay connected to our body, to what we feel, they're ancient. Vital. Out there in the wild, if you're not in touch with your instincts, your gut feelings, you're done. How long could you even survive without that? Not long, right? So yeah, that's where authenticity fits in. It's not just some feel-good, be yourself mantra. It's survival-level stuff. Huge. Great. So far, so good. But then here's the kicker. What happens when being authentic, being true to yourself, clashes with something just as vital? Like, say, the need for attachment. Because if you're a kid, attachment isn't optional. It's life or death. So, imagine this. If being authentic, feeling what you feel, expressing what's true threatens that attachment, then what? It's a nightmare scenario for a kid, really. The math is brutal. If I'm me, my parents might reject me. And parents, they send these messages without even realizing it. Not because they're monsters. Not because they don't love their kids. Most of the time, they're doing their best. But they're stressed or hurt or carrying their own baggage. And guess what gets passed down? Yeah, those little unspoken messages. That you, as you are, with all your messy feelings, are too much. Not acceptable. Man, I've done it myself. Said the wrong thing. Sent the wrong signals. And I didn't mean to. Actually, it was the last thing I wanted to do. But still, my kids? They got the message anyway. Society kind of sets us up like that, you know? And kids, they can't fight that. They're wired to choose attachment every time. So they suppress themselves. Push down their feelings. Hide who they are. Because survival, remember? It's not a choice. It's instinct. Fast forward a couple decades. Now you're 30, maybe 40, and someone asks you, what do you feel? And, nothing. Blank. You've been out of touch for so long. It's like you're a stranger to yourself. And even when you do feel something, a gut reaction, a little whisper of your truth, you shut it down. Because that's what you learned to do. It kept you safe back then. But now it's a problem. And we pay for it. With addictions, mental health struggles, even physical illnesses. All because way back when we had to make this impossible choice. Authenticity or attachment. And we chose attachment because what else could we do? Even now, as adults, we're still caught in that trap. We want to be real, to live as ourselves. But there's this fear lurking under the surface. What if being me costs me my connections? My relationships? It's terrifying. And that fear, man, it keeps so many of us stuck. It's heartbreaking, really. But it's also the first step to waking up, you know? Recognizing where it all started and deciding, finally, to find our way back to ourselves.
Our period of attachment is very, very long, but especially in the early years, it's absolutely indispensable. We just can't survive without attachments. No mammal can, but least of all can human beings. So we have this need to attach, to be close to people so they'll take care of us. That's obvious. We have another need, though, that evolution gave us, which is to be, as you said, authentic. And authentic is not some fancy new age spiritual state. It's actually feeling your gut feelings. It's absolutely essential. Let's demonstrate it. Let me ask you all a question. I'll get a show of hands. If you've had the experience of having a strong gut feeling about something and you ignored it and you were sorry afterwards, just raise your hand, okay? The vast majority of people here. Why is that? Because gut feelings were given us by nature to sense danger or safety. That's what they're given to us for. We evolved in the wild. We evolved out there in nature. We evolved out there for millions of years. And even our own species, until, if our own species has existed for an hour, then until 6 minutes ago, we lived out there in nature. Now, how long does any animal living in nature survive without their gut feelings? So it's essential. But what happens is, as a 2-year-old, you're angry about something. You're angry because you didn't get a cookie before dinner. You know, if your mom or dad are doing their job, they're not going to give you a cookie before dinner. So you're going to get angry. Well, that's all right. But what happens if your mom and dad read many, many psychology books, Jordan Peterson, for example, who says that an angry child should be made to sit by themselves until they come back to normal. Now, the only way we develop emotional health is if we're allowed to feel all our emotions as children, including anger, grief, sadness, joy. But some families, they can't handle that. Maybe the father grew up in a home where there was a lot of yelling and he can't stand the kid yelling. So he gives the message that if you're angry, you're going to sit by yourself. In other words, I'm going to threaten you with the loss of the most important thing to you, which is the attachment relationship. If you feel your feelings, you're going to be disattached. When you no longer feel your feelings, you can come back and talk to me. Well, now there's a conflict. Or what happens if the parents are in conflict with each other? There's a lot of stress, and the child just doesn't want to bother them with their own emotions. So now the child becomes the parent's emotional caregiver by suppressing their own feelings. So there's this conflict between attachment and authenticity. So in that conflict, attachment is going to win every time, and people suppress their authenticity. And specifically, if they weren't loved for who they are, they're going to work very hard to be liked. And if you want to be liked, just please everybody. Never say no, take everything on. Be responsible for what other people feel. Never disappoint anybody. They're all going to like you. But nobody's going to love you because they don't know you. So it's real work in this. And not only that, then there's all the social expectations that you should fit in and think like everybody else thinks, or dress like they all dress, or behave like they all behave. You know, so there's all these pressures not to be yourself. And then what happens is you get sick, you get depressed, you get anxious, you get cancer, you get autoimmune disease, you get addicted because the pain of not being yourself is too much. So how do you get back to yourself? Well, the good news is that the self that you abandoned all those years ago, not deliberately, not consciously, and it was never your fault, but what happens is that that self that you disconnected from, which is the essence of trauma, is the disconnection from yourself, that never went away. It's still there, and it's talking to you, and it's talking to you through your body, and it's talking to you through your emotions. So it's a matter of learning how to pay attention. And at some point, you have a decision to make. As a child, I had no choice. When there was a conflict between attachment here, authenticity over here, I had to choose. I didn't even choose because it's not conscious. I had to go with the attachment. As an adult, I don't have to anymore. And yes, if I'm authentic, I may lose some of my attachments. Some people who really liked me before will not like me. So you lose the attachment. And you have a decision to make. What would you rather have? Who would you rather have in your life? Them or yourself? That's the decision you're going to have to make sometime.
Here's the thing. The tug of war between attachment and authenticity doesn't have to define you forever. Yeah, it's tough. And yeah, it's shaped so much of who you are. But healing? It's possible. Reconnection with yourself, with others in a way that doesn't demand you lose yourself is possible. It starts with awareness, with understanding how those patterns were formed and why they feel so hard to break. From there, step by step, you can learn to trust yourself again, to listen to that quiet inner voice you've been tuning out for so long. Because authenticity isn't just about being yourself. It's about remembering yourself. If this resonates, if you're ready to explore what it means to truly come home to yourself, Inside Serene is here for you. It's a space where you can dive deep, with guidance, into the roots of these challenges and start creating a life that feels aligned, peaceful, and, most importantly, authentic. So, here's what to do next. Head over to Inside Serene to take the first step on your journey. And if this message hit home for you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's build this community of healing and authenticity together.